Welcome to a picture tour of 7 exciting countries: Britain, Spain, Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, and Mexico. Wonderful peoples, 4 of which are related to their presidential families. And here we see these families in those 3 countries. Who could be the start of Moms for South America? With Miss TV host Caracas, Venezuela, Miss Ecuador, runner-up Miss Universe, and virtual Miss Bogota, well, who was an attorney and secretary to President Uribe. But most of all, the friend of Archbishop Cisneros, TV radio host, and who Cisneros, the Archbishop, who was also a friend of Pope John Paul, who came to Cuenca, Ecuador, and he gave me the picture of them to copy and keep and sign. So we share these travels and experiences in order to provide a background of a vision long ago received for the New World, like the vision of James Monroe and our founding fathers, with a New Testament for the New World. Monroe codified what many believed was a special calling for the Americas as a land of promise. But promise from whom? Not kings and nobles, but a promise encoded in an idea, a very ancient idea codified by the Greeks that became one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The problem with Monroe's Declaration of Independence from kings and nobles is that Mexico, Cuba, and most all of Central and South America were not included because the European tyrants held sway. So today, we look to St. John Paul and St. Ronald Reagan's divine act with President Gorbachev in saving Russia from communist tyrants to become Christian again, and ask, is this possible with President Trump and Pope Francis to do the same and consecrate the Americas from Alaska to Argentina to Christ as one Christian continent? Is that possible? The reason it may be possible is Solomon's new temple built in Sao Paulo, Brazil. It's non-denominational, almost like a historic shrine to the idea of what Christianity is, from David and Solomon as father and son, the largest temple now in South America. But it's not really about religion. It's about the ontological meaning of religion, and Jesus Christ being the way and the true path to human evolution. So could Pope Francis and President Trump emblematically recognize this great temple and proclaim all the Americas under Christ, with Jesus as the ark of our covenant? Well, one idea for this is, as we see, is God's house as one house with many rooms, called denominations. Certainly one may be more significant than the other, but remember, Jesus walked through walls and addressed those he chose. Those who he chose, he addressed. That was significant from a carpenter of Galilee. But if we think of the idea of the imitation of Christ in our own lives, I remember I followed kind of the Course in Dreams with John Bunyan, Pilgrim's Progress, and later Course in Miracles, Marianne Williamson, in my studies to get an AA. Started out at diesel mechanics for ocean navigation, steering the merchant marines, then went to 7 other colleges, essentially 1 year each: shrimp farming, Texas Sea Grant; prawn farming, Australia; prawn farming, Taiwan; psychology, SMU; anthropology at the University of Mexico, with Carlos Castaneda's group of Naguals, yes, and then a quick BA in geology at CW and OSU, then a TESOL certificate from CU, Seattle, then a GIS and broker certificate study in real estate with a master's attempt at the University of Sydney in Australia. Well, the idea is that Jesus never followed Alice down the rabbit hole for a PhD. So I was imitating him and tried to use sonar to detect the meaning from above of what is below. This is why I like geology enough to spend 10 years with my department in freelance hunting the origins of the first Americans when we discovered the Kennewick Man on the Columbia River. But several events would add a supernatural dimension to all these travels. So the supernatural event actually was 1970 when I had the born-again experience like Franklin Graham described and like John Denver, George Burns, and Oh God. But uh, we began in 1981 being in Bosnia, the old Yugoslavia, which is now called Medjugorje, during the assassination attempts in 81 on John Paul and Reagan. They were just a month apart. And this was 2 years after Reagan came to SMU with Roy Rogers to give us a very fun talk before his election. Okay. Second was 5 years later in 1986, being invited in Christchurch to go and meet the Pope with the Senator Byrd's secretary, where we went to this little church outside of town and sat there with a group, and then the group ran, and then leaving us with the four to witness something out of the sky that surely came from Fatima. And this was a month after traveling all of Australia by an old Land Cruiser and having a near-death experience. An encounter like the two assassination attempts on John Paul and Reagan in 81. And years later I realized that those events were connected because John Paul and Reagan together consecrated Russia with Gorbachev as a result of those two assassination events, spiritually speaking, from the supernatural. So when I realized this over the years, I became a fan of the Pope and built him a chapel. Son and I built this chapel, straw bale and stucco, and it was a work of art dedicated to him. And then renovated the home, our home, to make a cafe, and kind of taken from some of his writings about Michelangelo from his church, the Sistine Chapel. Well, then one day I got this mission call while teaching English in Spain. He says, "Go to Venezuela, Ecuador, and Colombia and spread this message that I will give you there." I said, wow, okay, what a concept. Well, I did, because I had been raised with the Greek Orthodox friends in Dallas, and along the way attended all the denominational churches, and even baptized with the Mormons later in a travel log out of Mexico, Central and South American journeys. But eventually was baptized here at the Archbishop's Church in Ecuador, in Cuenca. So the reason for writing this book about the details of those travels is the idea that everything that happened was written in that book I received in 1970, the Born Again Experience, after that year in Mexico with Carlos Castaneda's group of seancers, like our Edgar Casey ARE group after high school years ago. And this book was like Pilgrim's Progress, a dream, with someone like Jesus speaking to me, I encountered in the dream with three oracles later outside the dream along the way that would prophesize the next 40 years of my life. Of course, I didn't believe it, and I forgot about it, but until I began to realize it and put the dots together and realize that, wow, all this was spoken in that dream. So the dream is really the main thing of this book. And so it was like the supernatural event seen in Christchurch with the Pope. Now, not exactly a religious person, more of a science person. I've read all the saints, but I'm a science guy. Nevertheless, all these events became like a composite puzzle with one picture. And the picture is Christ. The encounter with Christ and the Pope is a takeaway that discovering all these serendipity events tells me that America has a calling from the saints. And the saints are not made in Rome. The ones made by God when Jesus becomes the Ark of the Covenant. So that becomes our kind of real life. So we hope to discover in these latter days what saints have to say about this modern age and what that idea of the Monroe Doctrine has to do with Christianity in the evolution of science and man. The idea is that Christianity has been made new in the New World, a distinction that must be recognized since the world is now partitioned into three regions and three groups: Christianity, Islam, and the Hindu-Buddhism connection, mixed with communism in China. So the New World is becoming home to Christianity. Islam is back in the old world, and the others in Asia. So our task is to raise Christianity like the Statue of Liberty and leave religion to the others. Because with science, Christianity is the path of evolution to becoming fully human in a spiritual sense. And this was the message, the last message that Pope John Paul gave us from Medjugorje, saying, Medjugorje will save America. And this is how I believe he meant that.